I'm going to keep the facts vague just to protect my livelihood and the livelihood of my family, but I'm a teacher with some years' experience teaching multiple high school subjects with a focus on humanities and English. You could call me a red-pilled centrist with strong political opinions, so that means if you're an alt-righter, I am a cuck, and if you're on the left, I am literally Hitler. Regardless, I'll be keeping hidden for the foreseeable future. I'm not certain what to do with this channel, aside from this video. So I'm going to throw some things out there, see what sticks, but today we're talking about Jordan Peterson's latest video. I understand that I'm criticizing a sacred cow of the community in Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson's a man with whom I agree on almost everything. It's amazing to watch him take what is a psychological approach, an evolutionary approach to the same text that I take a literary and humanistic approach towards, and we come to the same conclusions from two different angles. It's absolutely fascinating. But on this last video, I disagree with the proposed solution. I don't disagree with his concerns, I don't disagree with his analysis of the situation, but I disagree with the proposed solution, and it's going to take a while, but let's get there. I have 4 points to make about his advice that he gives to middle schoolers, high schoolers, and the parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers. First, he's using the same destructive tactics as the regressives. Second, he's misunderstanding the age group. Third, I think those destructive tactics are unnecessary given the situation. And fourth, I don't think that the end game is being understood from a practical perspective, from a feet on the ground administrative perspective.
Gotta scream! Down!
For the first point, I say he's using the same destructive tactics as the regressives. When I say tactics, let's listen to what he is advising.
I think students should, with the backing of their parents if possible, leave their junior high and high school classes if any of the following topics arise. This means they should stand up, note their objections to the content. This sounds like indoctrination to me rather than education, so I'm leaving, and then leave. Perhaps they could encourage a classmate/friend to videotape their actions and post it on YouTube. It wouldn't take very many students performing such an act to produce a very powerful effect, and it is certain that many who won't have the courage to do so will agree secretly that such action was necessary. Here are the topics I regard as indicative of indoctrination rather than education. Diversity, inclusivity, equity. Conveniently, these form the acronym DIE, which is exactly what the philosophy underpinning their grouping and use should be encouraged to do. White privilege, systemic racism, gender. I'm not claiming that there is nothing to be learned about such topics or even that they shouldn't be discussed. What I am saying is if they are brought up in an elementary, junior high, or high school classroom, the odds are very high that the lesson to be learned will be one driven by ideological/propagandistic concerns rather than one aimed at the inculcation of knowledge, wisdom, or skill. Here are the words again. Diversity, inclusivity, equity, white privilege, systemic racism, and gender. There will be mistakes made with such an approach. Some who discuss issues such as inclusivity and equity are going to be more reasonable than others. But that does not change the fact that the philosophy driving the pushing forward of such topics is essentially ideological and propagandistic. So I think such active resistance will get the point across very effectively.
He gives 6 terms: diversity, inclusivity, equity, white privilege, systemic racism, and gender. And these are essentially trigger terms. Upon hearing these terms, he says you are to get up, and leave the room for fear of indoctrination. Or, probably not fear, let's be honest, a refusal of indoctrination. This causes problems. First, it undermines authority and rapport. What I mean by that, to say that you are to leave immediately upon hearing these terms undermines the authority and rapport that teachers have with students. And this is going to be difficult for me to explain, but I'm going to do my best. You see, often in class, I'm an entertainer. And so I'm going to throw out things to my classroom that might jar them, might throw them off in order to help get them to remember material. For example, let's say I'm talking about Odysseus, and I'm just giving a little preview of the Odyssey to my kids. I might say that Odysseus was promiscuous. And of course, 50%, give or take, will know what promiscuous means. So then I would say, what I mean is that he's kind of a player. That's in a good light. In a bad light, you could call him, and then I let the kids fill in the blanks, slut, man whore, what have you. And I'm like, sure, and then I wave it off. But I do this so that they remember the next part when I say, but the point is there are times when he's not exactly as focused on getting home as you might think that he should be. And I do that so that they understand a theme that's going to be present throughout the book. And they're going to help remember that just by having those triggers, those shock moments. Oh, man whore in this English class. Okay, this is going to be a little different experience. It's going to be fun. Okay. I do that just so it'll be a trigger in their mind to help them remember. It'll be a hook. But oftentimes this is taken out of context. This can be, it can just be some students mad at me. They can tell my boss, Mr. Satellogy is talking about man whores all through the class, and I was offended. And then my boss calls me in. I heard you were talking about man whores all throughout class, and I have to explain. No, I wasn't talking about man whores. I was talking about Odysseus. The students brought up man whoring, and I did my best to get them back on track. It's a fine line you walk between attention getting and losing your job. Suffice to say, I'm extremely motivating as a teacher, and I'm not very boring. However, it is often a difficult line. It's a line that requires trust and rapport. Trust that I'm going somewhere with this. Trust in me as a teacher that I'm not just here to joke around, that we have something we're doing that's important, and that we'll get there. Just follow me. We're going to get there. And also a rapport that we can joke around about these things, that we're not being offensive, that the purpose is behind the jokes and the entertainment value that we're getting out of it. And that same kind of trust, that same sort of really authority and rapport that I have in the classroom works here. I may be talking about equity with good purpose, not to convert them to People's Republic of the United States, but because it's an issue at hand that I'm discussing in an intelligent manner. But if you follow these rules, you're going to end up undermining my rapport and the authority I have in the classroom. And it destroys trust that the students have in the teacher. Now they're looking for things. Now they're looking to rat people out. Who's not on board? And if you're wondering, well, why would I ever bring these up? If half the teachers are talking about these terms with the idea of indoctrinating the kids, and then 40% of the teachers aren't mentioning anything at all because they're trying their best to be apolitical, and then you have me, and I don't want to remain apolitical, I just want to remain as unbiased and open as possible with kids. In other words, I'm not going to tell kids we're not going to discuss politics. I'm going to tell kids that we can discuss whatever they wish, and I'll do my best to be fair and listen to all points of view and engage in the conversation and help spark conversation among students. That means the kids themselves are going to ask me about the terms they've heard in other classes, like white privilege, systemic racism, gender, all those terms you listed. I've talked about each one of these in class, and I do my best to keep it as balanced as I can. And I'll be honest, sometimes like with white privilege, it becomes kind of difficult to not make it seem laughable because I happen to be one of the few white people my kids ever met who grew up in harsher circumstances than many of my students, than most of my students. I'd say than damn near all my students. So they start to look at me and talk about white privilege and wonder, well, This doesn't make a lot of sense. But regardless of that, that's their decision to come to that term. I do my best to prevent multiple sides. But your system is going to not trust me and ask my students to not trust me. And that is destructive. It's the same tactic as the left whenever they want to burn it down. Furthermore, it disregards hierarchy. Right? You are now no longer in a position to say, let me see what the teacher's going to talk about today. Let me do my best to grasp the material as a student. Instead, you're looking for ways to call teachers out on their wrongdoing. Isn't that very similar to the problems we're having on campuses at Evergreen? And I'm not going to give all the examples. You know the examples. But the point is, it's the same situation. And instead of it being college adults, you're now asking teenagers to say, I know better than you, your content, and what is important in your classroom. That's bad. Now you're saying that's what we have to do because there's so much propaganda. It's gotten so bad. And I would say we don't have to do that. The problem is at the teacher, and the problem really is at administration, and it comes down the line, and you address the problem there. You don't address the problem by destroying the hierarchy. Because there are people like me on campus who want to remain, like I said, that centrist. What you're doing is undermining that. You are the general who orders an artillery strike on his own men to spite the enemy.
You need a haircut. You need a shoe shine. You need aristocratic glow in the dark erotic magnet.
Now for point 2, I'm afraid Jordan Peterson is overestimating the maturity of the students he's talking about. I've taught students propaganda, and they struggle with it. It's not immediately recognizable, and especially when it's something wrapped into a lesson, that's going to be hard for them to pick apart. Half of the students probably won't even understand the overarching concepts of indoctrination and propaganda if you were just to talk to them about it in an ordinary fashion. Now, that's not to say that students are stupid. They're actually very smart, especially socially. They're quite savvy, and they are great at picking up on bullshit. But the thing with propaganda, and especially when it's delivered in a lesson, is that it's not bullshit. Because the teacher actually believes it. There's a difference between trying to convince students that something you don't believe in is very important, like a school assembly. We got to go to this assembly today. Why? Well, it's about this and it's very important you go. They're going to see through that. That's bullshit. On the other hand, if you're a true believer in communism and you wrap that into your lesson and poke holes in capitalism here and there, that's not necessarily bullshit. You're a true believer. It's just propaganda. And they're going to have a hard time understanding it. So now you're putting students in with a half-cocked idea of propaganda. They're in a position to judge the content. Isn't that the problem we're having on campuses? Right? I mean, I know I'm mixing point 2 and point 1, but when you got students railing against instructors' exams, saying the exam itself is white supremacist, or somebody saying that you can't teach this way, you can't have colonial science, well, now you're putting students on the other side of the aisle into a position to say you can't teach that's propaganda. And this all goes back to trust. You don't trust the masters. And I get that you don't trust the masters, but once again, that artillery strike on everybody. And I'm not trying to say that some people can't judge content. I have plenty of students who can, but the majority can't. And I've actually had kids teach my class before. They wanted to teach a lesson on something, I let them teach a lesson on something. So this isn't the same thing as having a teacher's assistant. I'm just talking about your average student, or even below average student, which we'll get to later, judging the content of your class. That's a terrible position to put the teacher in. And the students. Students shouldn't be responsible for that either. So let's talk about those students who do understand propaganda and don't want to have any part of it. Those students are the ones who are most likely to be grade conscious. They're already your intelligent students. They're already your participating students. They're not the ones looking for a reason to leave. They're already trying to stay there in the classroom. For those students who can identify the propaganda, they're the students who are resistant to it. They're the ones who know what it is and can tone it out. So they're not your concern, really. I mean, of course, everybody's your concern. You should get this out of the system. But the ones who are going to be able to appropriately judge, identify propaganda, and remove themselves from it are the ones I'm least concerned with, and I think they're the ones you should be least concerned with, too. Furthermore, they've already got active parents. A lot of these high-performing students are the ones with active parents who are involved in their lives, which, once again, is a bulwark against propaganda. So that brings us to the other students. The slackers, the distraught, the defiant, the stoners. Kids looking for a reason to leave. Now, this next part, it's going to get a little personal because this has been an issue I've had. You have a group of students who want to leave classes. And the classes they want to leave are the classes that are the hardest, where the teacher makes them work, the rigorous teachers. What ends up happening is you have now a group of kids leaving for a myriad of reasons in the administrator's office, and of course for the other teacher they'll cite propaganda. But the kids who left my class, well, they don't really have a firm understanding of what propaganda is, so they got to come up with another reason. They're not going to say, I left because I wanted to go get high, or I didn't feel like being at school today. They're incentivized to say something they do understand, that's simple and incendiary. He's racist. He offended me. He triggered me. Right? They were talking about man whores, and that really, really offended me on a deep level. This is going to hurt the good and the bad, and it's not going to get the school that you want. It's going to burn the whole thing down. Once again, that artillery strike that hits friend and foe alike.
Don't need to walk around in circles, walk around in circles, walk around in circles, walk around there.
Now, the third reason that I'm advocating against this solution is that it's unnecessary. Destruction, the destructive tactics, they are a last resort. I could see the destruction of the classroom setting would be appropriate if I thought it was absolutely necessary, but it's not. And we'll come back to this later, the other option. But to leave a classroom is to shut down discourse. That's, in effect, you're saying, I will not engage with you. You're not even saying I disagree. And shutting down discourse is the last straw for a functioning liberal system.
Fill my belly with your whispering.
Your end game is to draw attention. Practically, that means you need to get administration noticing. Otherwise, nothing happens. Students leaving is inconvenient. That's the whole point. It is technically inconvenient. You got to track them down. You got to find out where they are. You got to corral them. It becomes a manhunt on campus. It's an inconvenience to administration, and that's what the fire is that's going to draw their attention. And we already know that the kids we're talking about, their parents care, right? You said you want parents' permission on this. So you're talking about concerned parents. Then you have your answer there already. Those are the same parents that can just skip the kid. Don't make the kid do the work. Make the parent get involved. We need a parent organization. We need Parents Against Communism. I don't know what we need to call it, but we need parents involved. It's going to inconvenience administration to have 12 conferences in a week with parents saying the same thing that these three teachers are all talking about, how Fidel Castro was a great hero. I mean, you get enough of this in there, and you're going to see changes happen. Otherwise, you're putting the burden entirely on the kids, and that's unfair. You're asking them to, in effect, fight an unfair fight and risk their grades, risk their relationship with their teacher, which even if the teacher's a leftist, he can still be a decent guy or gal, and they want to have a rapport with this teacher. So make the responsible adults do the work. And they're more on a peer level with the teacher anyways. That's more of a peer group, teacher and parent, than the student. Otherwise, what I see happening is you're reinforcing a destructive, cynical behavior in the student body. And overall, once again, that's a tactic to burn it down. And that's if we've gone too far. And if we've gone too far, then why do we care anyways? I don't think we've gone too far. I'm fighting as though we can salvage this thing. And that's it. That's the solution. Parents need to get involved. Your whiniest parents right now, that is coming from the left only. It even happens with my students who lean more right and complain to me about these things that they see. They're hesitant to complain. They see, it's weak, it's all right, whatever, it'll be fine. And I'm assuming the parents are the same way. We got to fix that. We've got to fix that and get them involved. And it's easier to get parents involved than to get a whole bunch of kids to do this. And it's much less destructive to the system as a whole. That's the big solution. I would love to do more. And if you have any ideas on what else to do, post them at the bottom. If you have any videos with solutions, let me know. I'll watch them. If Dr. Peterson, you would like to reach out to me, I'd love to talk to you about it, because I'm on the ground here, and anything you can come up with where I can straddle that line of not being fired, but at the same time get back to good old-fashioned liberalism on the campus, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to know. So I'm going to keep on making what impact I can in the classroom, providing as many points of view as I can, letting the students make these decisions, providing a sort of bulwark against the it's the left or the highway attitude that I see overtaking my campus and other campuses around me. This has been Applied Cytology, and thanks for listening.